Ruben.
Roberto, when were you born? Where in Cuba? Tell me a little bit about your life in Cuba.
Well, I was born on November 25, 1936. I just turned 76 just last month. Was born of a family with my grandfather being captain of the police in the late 20s, early 30s. My father studied in the United States and he graduated from the Louisiana State University, went back to Cuba and set up banks, commercial banks throughout the island. I was educated in American schools, Phillips, Ruston. Then some of the situations changed and it was a little dangerous to study at the University of Havana. So I had to take a number of private professors and so on in order to be able to reach what I am today. And I was very fortunate that during my growth in Cuba, since little kid to my 22, which is when I left Cuba in 1960, I was able in schools to make friends from every single angle. I was a very close friend to the Prio family because of Susie Prio, who was the godmother of one of my kids, and I'm the godfather of one of her kids. My father knew the relationship with some of the family because of the banking industry, and they were involved in banking. And subsequent to that, or also at the same time with that, my youth was a lot in the Dr. Remos family, and my brother and the Remos were very close friends, and they used to go every Saturday and Sunday to swim in the swimming pool of Elisa Godínez, and I was a little kid behind them. And when they were finished swimming, Ruben Batista and I were in the swimming pool and doing our mischievous things and so on. And from that time, since I was possibly 8, 9, is when my friendship, my very close friendship with Ruben Papo Batista started, and it grew till the last days.
You were like brothers.
Like brothers.
So those years, so now I understand why you're the spokesperson and you have it so much in your heart, the Batista family.
My family was never involved in politics. My family was never related to any governmental activities, regardless who they were. But we were very simple, good friends, and the friendship actually brought a very close bond between all of us. We went to same schools together and so on. And due to the divorce of Elisa Godínez and General Batista, and when he was in his second marriage, the president used to go, before he was president, he used to go to Mirta Batista's house for dinner or for lunch every week. And Ruben and I used to be there. So I was making a relationship with Fulgencio Batista as a plain kid, as a simple kid. And it grew. It grew to the point of a very, very close relationship. And we experienced many things before the 10th of March and after the 10th of March together. And that's what brought me to be so close to many historical things that I lived, that I went through it, and that's the reason I know how some of these things took place and what happened, simply as a kid going around and being there. Yeah.
Amazing. And so you can, I could feel safe to ask you, how was Batista? So many people have, it's like a love and hate relationship. A lot of people love him. Yet why do so many, why in 1959 did so many people want him out and wanted this monster that they have today?
Gina, if I would have, to answer that specific question, if I would have been able to take one by one each enemy of Fulgencio Batista and let him spend 15 minutes with him, he would have no enemy. That was Fulgencio Batista. As an individual, he was a very, very loyal, close to his friends. As a family member, he was unbelievably a family-oriented individual. And I've always saw in him a great interest in the things that the Cuban people needed and what Cuba wanted to become. I was able to live that by experience, day by day, either in Mirta's house, either in my house, either in Cuquine or in Palacio, during the various phases. But one of the things that always called my attention of Batista was his memory. 1953, if I recall correct, we were having dinner at Mirta's house, and as he was leaving, we stepping down to the sidewalk, and all of the bodyguards and everything were there, and the guy comes over from the dark with smelly clothes, beard down to here. You couldn't even recognize the guy. And one of these custodios, bodyguards of Batista, I think it was either Sadulé or Bocanegra, one of them, stopped him. And Batista saw him and says, no, 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 let him come close. And the guy gets close to the president. He says, Mr. President, you probably don't remember me. He says, come on, of course, Fulano, I forgot the name. You worked with me on the 4th of September in 1933. Here is $100, get dressed, buy a clothes, shave, and go and see me to the palace tomorrow. And I saw that evidence of the memory of Batista so many times that was unbelievable. And in that, I tell you, he was as a person. I'm not talking politicians or anything like that, because I was never involved in that. My feelings are military because of my grandfather, Capitan Torricella, and my personal relationship. But he was a fantastic human being.
I see that you wear the same ring that my father, Lieutenant Colonel Sosa-Garcia, used to wear, and that I used to steal from him, and not steal, he used to put it on me, and I was a little kid, obviously, and I used to ask him about that ring, and he sat down and told me the story about that ring, and I'm not going to disclose it, but I want you to, since I have you,
have
the same ring, it's an honor for me to see that ring on you.
That is fun. That is a funny story that I will tell you. I was 15 or 16 years old, and I asked my father that I'd like to have a motorcycle. And he said to me, "You're crazy. If I buy you a motorcycle, you're dead tomorrow." And he wouldn't buy the motorcycle. But about a week or 2 weeks later, he came in and he gave me a brand new Chevrolet. And to me, was the greatest surprise. So I started with my Chevrolet back and forth, driving without a driver's license. Every night, if it was not Abejón Puñal, it was Paco Prieto, everybody was taking me to prison. I would go in, and half hour later I'm out again. But I went through the whole thing. And the funny thing is that one day, now after the 10th of March, we were having dinner in the house, and I was telling General Batista, General, I'm having a problem that I'm driving my car. I don't have the age for driver's license, but I would like to find a way that I can drive safely and so on, and don't have this problem. He said, don't worry, Robertico, next week we'll take care of it. So next week we come back to the house for dinner, and we are already in the dessert portion of the dinner, and he hasn't said anything to me. And I said, General, remember you said to me about my driving and so on? He says, yeah, but I found out that you know why they're taking you to jail. And he said, why? He said, because you put a siren in your car. Yes, how do you find out? He says, I know what you do, Robertico. But anyway, he puts his hand back, and the aide comes in and puts a box, and it was a ring. He put it in my finger, and he said, with this ring, they're not going to stop you anymore. But besides that, I'm going to give you something. So he takes out a business card that had the Cuban emblem on the top, and it said Fulgencio Batista y Saldívar, presidente. And on the back, he writes, autoridades civiles y militares, Robertico trabaja, without last name, Robertico trabaja conmigo. Denle toda la ayuda que él necesite y cualquier cosa me llama. Y lo fijan, he signed it. That's what I use in Cuba, and nobody ever stopped me anymore.
That's how you got the ring.
That's how I got the ring.
Because I know that most of his military high officers,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know most of them, but I know my dad had the same ring.
Yeah,
So
no, it was a. I don't like to wear rings, to be honest with you. This one I wear because it belonged to my grandfather, Capitan Torricella, and when he died, he gave it to my dad, and my dad pawned it like 5 or 6 times in order to buy food and pay his studies at LSU in New Orleans. So when my father died, he gave it to me and I used it. And then General Batista gave me this one, and I decided to put it on. And I've got so many other rings of my own given by other people, but I don't use. These are the only 2.
Those are the only 2 you need.
The only 2 I know. Right.
Awesome story, I love it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, how did it all come about? I mean, because besides that we're Cuban, if you look at history and you read any historical book and you see certain movies, always they picture from that era, from 1950 to 1958, Cuba, everybody wanted to be in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
The dollar was equal to the peso.
The peso was equal to
the dollar. And what happened to those people? How can they possibly go from a very Cuban saying that Guatemalteca, whatever, however that saying goes.
Gina,
Batista was not that, he was a president, he was not a dictator as many think he was.
When, regardless what the name of the president is, when you have the 3 powers that are part in the democracy, executive, judicial, and congressional, if those powers work independently, I don't care who's the president, you are not a dictator. And those powers work independently in Cuba. And one of the reasons Fidel Castro is alive is because the Congress insisted on Batista to also include in the freedom that he provided, to include the Castro group. Secondly, one of the greatest dangers that we received in our government was the judicial power, because every time they picked up somebody putting bombs, and even priests making bombs, then they would let him go. And Batista would give orders in front of me in one case when they saw a priest giving out misales with cargas adentro. He said, don't touch him. He's a priest. Don't do anything to him. But what I think, Gina, is that in Cuba we had a combination of hate with envy. Many people envy a sergeant that came out of nowhere in Banis, that all of a sudden was able to handle a revolution in 1933 that turned the country around and prevented communism. That actually was the thing that brought us into the democratic process that we lived from 1940 thereafter. And many people say how the rich people, the people who were to do with patrimonio and everything, these people would feel bad, and they even denied access to the president of Cuba to the Havana Yacht Club, because oh, here es el negro este, or, that kind of an attitude. So I believe that the combination of envy with hate, exactly, it actually continued. Many people saw, even though there was a great growth of the country, even though we had the liberties, we had a beautiful armed forces, we had, what is it that we didn't have? One of the things that, in my opinion, happened is that the network of communist activities again tried to make out of Cuba in the 1950s, which they were successful. The same thing that they tried to start it in 1920s and try again to do it in 1933. When they didn't succeed in 1933, they tried to do it in Colombia in 1948 with the Bogotazo, and they were not successful. Fidel was part of the Bogotazo, as you may recall. So then they went back to Cuba, and they used the excuse of the 10th of March as a possibility to start creating hate. The machinery that the communism used in Cuba was possibly one of the best marketing tools that I've ever seen in my life, because they were able to make the Cubans zombies, irreflexive people that didn't use their brains, and they said anything against Batista. And yes, anything against Batista was Fidel Castro. We told them who Fidel Castro was. Everybody knew who Fidel Castro was. His times in the University of Havana, his times in Bogota, all of that stuff, everybody knew it. Yet the problem is anything without Batista, they've got it. Another thing is that they started saying that Batista should have never done el 10 de marzo. El 10 de marzo nunca fue empezado por Batista. But the 10th of March, really, it's a date that was decided on the 7th of March when I was having dinner with Batista. The whole revolution, or the whole problem with Colombia, started in 1951 with 3 professors of the Escuela Superior de Guerra, that they were García Bárcena, Ramón Agramonte, and Portel Vilá. Those 3 people worked together with Capitán García Tuñón, and with them they started to create an activity in Colombia that was intended to give a coup to the government of Prio, and the person that would be the populacho, that would represent the people, because the army couldn't do it by itself, was Eduardo Chivas. When Eduardo Chivas ended up in the first place in las encuestas populares, then Chivas told the 3 professors that he was not going to be in front of the movimiento. The 3 professors, specifically García Tuñón, went to, García Bárcena went to García Tuñón and told him that he was no longer involved and that they were not going to do it. The military found themselves without a leader. And 4 times García Tuñón visited President Batista in Cuquine. And 4 times Batista rejected being in front of the movimiento, except when they assassinated Alejo Cosío del Pino. When they assassinated Cosío del Pino, for the 5th time, García Tuñón went to Batista and said, if you don't do it, we're going to do it ourselves. And Batista is when he said that we'll do it. On the 7th of March, we're having dinner, and 3 persons come into the house. One of them was García Tuñón, the other one was Colacho, and the other one was Rodríguez Calderón. And Batista gets up goes to the separate for 5 minutes, and then they came back and we kept on talking and making chistes and all of that stuff. Here in El Exilio, I found out that that night they decided that the coup was going to be on the 10th of March, that the posta was going to be posta número 4, and that the time was 2:30 in the morning. That was decided on the 7th of March. I was present. I saw it. So the communism was very successful in making believe everybody that Batista was at fault, and all of the things. But even Prio even Carlos Prio, got together, and I was involved in that, with Juan J. Remos. And he told Remos that he wanted to delegate the power of his authority to the military. Remos went and told Batista. And Batista said, tell Prio not to do that. And Prio saw that action of Batista. And if you go to Bohemia, de 17 de septiembre de 1951, if I recall correct, you'll find the Prio declarations in there that he was ready to deliver the government to the military, and if not, force the elections in favor of Batista. It's written, it's in black and white, that's history. But unfortunately, people in Cuba, like I told you, and I'll read you, I'll read you something. The danger to Cuba was not Fidel Castro or the 26th of July movement, but the educated, well-to-do, irresponsible citizenry capable of supporting a man of his well-known gangster background. It will be easier to undo the damages and destruction of a Castro tyranny than to restore the necessary common sense and good judgment to the citizenry willing to have such a man as their undisputed leader, when truly a bloody revolution was never needed in Cuba. The problem is much deeper and far more serious than Castro, who is a mere tool of and symptom of the communism that conquered and destroyed us. Blaming the Castro communism only should not blind anyone to the vast cofrade of fools that made him their prince. The Republic will survive a Fidel Castro. It is less likely to survive a multitude of fools such as those that made him his Robin Hood. That's true fact of what happened in Cuba.
That is the bottom line.
And unfortunately, that was done by the rich, by the people that have power, and the people that were the elite of our country. Much the same way that has happened in Venezuela as well.
Right, but in Cuba, Adriana Castillo put it perfectly. In Venezuela, it's been a slow-moving process. But the next day Adriana woke up, there was no bacon, there was no butter.
Because you will never see that the process of the Cuban Revolution will ever happen again in Latin America. What you will see is the system, the structure of the system, moving in a way like you are seeing it in Venezuela, like you're seeing in Nicaragua and Ecuador, for the three primary countries, possibly Bolivia as well. But it's a new movement that has been able to find the voids o los huecos de la democracia and using them in order to get themselves in power perpetually. And they have been successful at that too.
Very much so, very much so. Let me bring you into the present time, tell me when you arrived to the United States with your family, how you've made your life here.
Well, after having some difficulties in Cuba during 1959, in 1960 we started to plan moving out, and after I was able to moving some influence and so on, be able to get my mother and father out, then I came out with my wife and my daughter, and she was pregnant 7 months of my second daughter, and then my brother and his wife and daughters followed. That was in 1960, and as usual, in 1960, when we came in here without a penny and with nothing to do, is when I made the most money, because I was parking cars in Miami Beach and I didn't have to pay taxes on the tips. so that was the. But anyway, that's how we started. And there was a gentleman in Miami by the name of Norman Asher, who represented in South Florida the same companies that we represented in Cuba. And when my dad came, he was very kind enough to give him a blank check and says, you write whatever you need up to $10,000, which my father didn't accept it. But it was something that gave us the strength to work, and he gave me a job, and I started working with him for $200 a month back in 1960, late 60s, starting in 61. At that time, obviously, I was able to be a little bit more quiet money-wise, and I had sold in Cuba Hilton Hotel and some of the other hotels because I represented American Standard, the plumbing fixtures company. And all of that commission, the company was able to save it in the United States. So that helped me out. I started a business of frozen shrimp in Maracaibo, Venezuela. It grew quite a bit, and we started importing it into the United States and selling it through the East Coast of the United States. And that was great until I was called by American Standard again, and they asked me if I was willing to take a position with them that required a 3-year introduction and training and education course, and after that then you would be part of the company. I took it. It was the best university I've ever had. It was the best teachings I ever had in cost accounting, in manufacturing, industrial relations, marketing, everything that you can think of. And I ended up as being their director of international operations for export, director of international export division. And I worked with them for 10 years, covered the entire Latin American countries, covered Middle East, Europe, and grew in that company fantastically until I retired. After 10 years, I retired. But while I was at American Standard, I went to a period of time during those 3 years of training. I had to go to research and development. And at that time, the United States government wanted to investigate a piece of plastic full of holes in order to purify water. And that's how we came up with the reverse osmosis system to desalinate seawater and convert it into potable water. When I retired from American Standard, I set up my own operation in TEXMA. And in TEXMA is a short for International Export Management, where I was managing the exports of many manufacturers in the United States to Latin America. But as a division of INTEXMA, I set up Water Source. And Water Source was a manufacturer of reverse osmosis equipment. And I sold a bunch of them throughout the Caribbean, Dominican Republic in particular. And one of the biggest one that I sold was in the island of St. Martin, where by helping, this is a funny story too, there was a lot of traffic of Cubans coming from Colombia, stopping in Curacao and taking drugs to Cuba and bringing it to the United States. So at that time, old man Bush was the vice president of the United States. And with Jeb Bush, I was able to donate the Coast Guard to the government of the Netherlands Antilles. That opened the door with the Prime Minister, and even in regular competition and everything, because it was not just given to me. I was given the order to build and install a seawater desalination system in the island of St. Martin. And I was able for a good number of years to supply all the water, 2,000 cubic meters per day, to the island of St. Martin with the seawater desalination system.
Amazing.
And I did that. It was a great experience. And subsequent to that, years went by, and right now I'm building houses for poor people.
Interesting. That's good. That's good. That's very good. In closing, I know that you're very involved. I asked Adriana Cantillo the same question, and I know you explained it a little bit already, and she has as well. I know you're very involved in el Banquete del 4 de Septiembre, the banquet on September 4th. I think it's a beautiful thing. You know, this year that I attended and many others, something very nice that continued on, that Ruben Batista continued on into the United States for all these families of the Constitutional Armed Forces of Cuba to bring unity and oneness between all of us. So I want to thank you for that. And if you want to touch a little bit about why you do it, the passion you have with it. And this year you guys outdid yourself with the mariposas, that's it.
The one thing that I do it is because of this ring. When the president put the ring in my finger, and he says, "I'm not giving the ring to you so that you don't go to jail or take, because of not having a driver's license. This ring is a clear evidence of good luck and loyalty. And what I want from my friends is loyalty. So that loyalty built into me over the years, and the friendship grew and grew and grew. And we spent many good times when he was in Madeira, in Portugal, more so in Madrid. I used to go to Generalissimo 10, to his house there, and we had great times, and we had conversations of things that I am now publishing as historical facts. But I started to work with Ruben on the Banquete del 4 de Septiembre because Ruben was very interested in three primary things. First, the celebration of the date because of a historical issue, and he mentions, don't use my father as a special thing. Use him because he was part of the thing as a history. Secondly, the most important thing is to render homage to our armed forces. And last but not least, look for the unity of the Cubans. Don't bring politics into the 4th of September. We started doing that about 15 years ago, and I worked with him back and forth. And when he was very ill, that I spent his last 6-7 months with him, about a week or so before he died, in his deathbed, he said, Roberto, do me the favor, if you can, to continue celebrating the 4th of September. Please keep honoring our armed forces. And please honor everybody that have given their blood for Cuba. So that's what I'm doing.
And I think it's a beautiful thing what you do, and thank you for honoring my father this year.
Of course.
My entire family was very touched by it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Every other father that was there, and we look forward to the 80th celebration. That'll be a big one.
I think it's going to be a big one. Fortunately, I've already got the okay from Zoe Valdez to be our primary speaker. Now with the conversation we just had, maybe we can get Willie to Chirino to help us out as well. And I hope that I can do, if this is the last one that I do, but I want this 80th anniversary to be something very special for all of us, for Cubans that believe in democracy, believe in what we have, believe in our armed forces, and that if I do that, I will rest peacefully.
Thank you. Thank you today for your time, Roberto.
Thank you, and salud, salud, salud.